Well, I'm delighted to be recording an interview today with Simon Scott, Managing Director of IQEQ here in the Isle of Man, and John Bateson, Chief Commercial Officer at IQEQ in the Isle of Man. Welcome, gentlemen. Before we get into our discussion today, it'd be great to hear a little bit more about your background. And perhaps, Simon, I could come to you first.
Yeah, I joined in January this year, so just about nearly 6 months in, but I spent 35 years in banking with one of the big four banks, last 20 years on the Isle of Man. So my familiarity with companies like IQEQ is really IQEQ as a client. So lots of clients within Barclays were either private clients or trust and corporate service providers. The last 10 years in Barclays, I've been country head in the Isle of Man. And took a short career break and happy to be at IQEQ.
John, you've been a regular supporter of PCD over many years. You've come out to our events in Switzerland, but for those who've not had the chance to meet you, perhaps you could explain a little bit more about your background, and you've recently joined IQEQ, so tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I've been in the private wealth services and offshore industry for about 30 years, worked for a number of family offices, been primarily based in the Isle of Man, but have an international sort of reach. And recently joined IQEQ in their sort of new acquisitions, and trying to link everything into that with all our group offices, which has been a very exciting time.
And IQEQ are an exciting global franchise, aren't they? Offices all around the world. Do you find that you're connecting with other offices and collaborating across the group?
Yeah, I think it's grown very much through acquisition. So it's over 20 different countries now. And there's a lot of collaboration between different offices. So if it's something that we can't provide from the Isle of Man business, then we look to what we can do through other businesses. And it's very much diversified as a business. So not just private clients, but corporates, and very much now into the fund sector as well.
Fantastic. John, we've seen through the pandemic that the Isle of Man has proved a resilient place for people to come and run a business. Have you seen entrepreneurs opting to come to the Isle of Man looking for that safety and stability to expand their trade?
Very much so. I think a number of people who have got relations in the UK have decided to come back to the island, but also within the tech and substance test. That's been a quite attractive option for people with the amount of space we have. I think the Isle of Man was very good during the pandemic. We managed to lock down and have curate a reasonable standard of life still. Obviously now it's sort of running through the country, but I think at least at the times when it was really difficult, we've managed to we sort of stood by it, and the government did fantastically well on that basis.
And as someone running a business during that time, Simon, were you pleased with the way that the country pulled through the pandemic and everyone came together in order to try and succeed and keep businesses running?
Yeah, in many ways, actually, in some ways it's easy being an island because we could take immediate action and close down the border. But that proved to be a very positive, tactical step to make sure that we could continue running businesses for some time. We didn't have the same levels of lockdown as many other jurisdictions. The health service managed very well, and as a jurisdiction generally across government and private sector, we coped very well. Technology was very resilient. A lot more people obviously working from home in a different environment. And showing that level of collaboration and still continuing businesses for our clients during some very difficult times.
And in terms of people hiring staff here on the island, there's a deep pool of expertise in professional services. When you're growing the IQEQ office here, do you find it, you can attract the talent that you want to grow your business?
Yeah, we focus on attracting talent through our name and our brand and our broader agenda around supporting communities, supporting colleagues, looking at colleague development. But it's a very, very, very tight employment market at the moment, more or less full employment. So it is being very, very targeted and specific about trying to get the right people in to support our business, the people with the right culture, right mindset. But a very challenging employment market at the moment.
Okay, thank you. And John, you touched on economic substance before. The way advisors are now setting up structures is very much with economic substance principles in mind. How are you seeing the Isle of Man proposition in light of this, particularly for new private wealth structures?
To be honest, I think pretty well, simply because we have a variety of industries, and as a result of which we've got that experience to demonstrate to regulators. As a whole, there's plenty of space, there's office, and there's a lot of, as I say, that varied industries from banks to TCSP industry, funds. So I think we're pretty ideally placed for that, but it's also by having that space, it allows people to move in. There's a number of companies that are moving into the Isle of Man, and they can demonstrate substance accordingly.
I mean, Simon, have you seen companies deciding to come and relocate? Do you notice just on the ground, as someone involved in the local business environment, an influx of new companies and new ideas and energy?
Yeah, there are some. I think there's two sides to it. One is more companies doing structuring through the Isle of Man, but also there's been an increase in inquiries from companies through the government or through private sector to actually relocate here. As John said, the issue around substance is something we can advise and support clients with, but also the Isle of Man's got lots of space. So there are some global names recently, particularly in the gaming sector and tech sector more generally, that are relocating to the Isle of Man. The safety and stability is also, a very important factor. I think the recent survey, World Population Review, talked about the Isle of Man being the 4th safest place to live in the world. So, a big credit and a big positive for the Isle of Man to be able to attract both individuals and businesses here.
Great. And John, I mean, you deal with advisors on an international basis. Where is it that you see the strongest kind of demand coming from clients to the Isle of Man? I know South Africa is a huge market and there's a lot of collaboration, but are there any other hotspots around the world that you see there being a sweet spot of collaboration?
We see a lot from the Middle East and the Far East. We have offices there as well. And I think as the group has grown quite rapidly over the last 3 years, the interaction between group offices is where the focus is. And as a result of which, our recent acquisition in the US with a number of companies and advisors has opened up a unique opportunity certainly for IQEQ, but for that structuring perspective, because we have that advisory side in the US, which I think in sort of historically, a lot of people have been a little bit wary of trying to do the offshore in the US, but now we've got that capability. So that's opened up a huge, environment for us on a global scale, which has been very exciting.
Does that open up channels in specific industries like gaming, which might have, US connections, or, in the tech sector, or there's certain industries here that...
Yeah, I think there is that opportunity for us. I think more from our global reach as a group, where I think we are able to assist clients and individuals a lot better, is that we have that pure and true global offering. So where a family office may set up in Luxembourg, there'll be a Swiss connection, a Jersey connection, an Isle of Man connection, all working for that one client, which I think is a difference for a lot of our competitors or other group companies. They don't have that being able to do everything within one sort of structure, but also a combined service offering which is linked in as opposed to operating in silos. So I think there's a really exciting time for us at the moment.
Great. And on the structuring of international assets, I mean, perhaps you give us a sense of the type of assets you're commonly dealing with. Is it real estate, private equity, or, give us a sense of what the...
I mean, the Isle of Man is obviously well known for the aviation and yachting industry, which we have a very good offering on. But the trust structures we see a lot of doing through African clients. And a lot of our business, certainly on the island, is corporate and commercial property. We have some very big structures on that side. The VAT being a very attractive option for many clients. And foundations are becoming more and more an attractive route for businesses to set up here. So I think on the whole, we are fairly focused on where the Isle of Man has a niche, but if not, the great thing about the IQE brand is that we can refer it into group offices where it may be more applicable for a certain asset type, depending on what the holding structure is above it.
Are you still seeing strong demand for UK property, real estate investments from abroad?
Very much from overseas investors, and especially where it's commercial property that's registered. It has a real advantage from the Isle of Man perspective on the speed of getting the VAT number and the real help that the Isle of Man government does from a VAT department in working with industry.
Okay, terrific. And you mentioned there on aviation and marine assets. The pandemic's created a mini boom in some of those sectors, or at least changed behaviour. Have you seen an impact in your aviation and marine divisions here in IQEQ?
Yes, very much. Certainly on the aviation, I think people are looking at seeing it as more of a business asset. And obviously with the safety and the way the world is generally now after recent events, I think that the private aviation industry is doing very well. There are the usual hiccups, so to say, of supply and demand at the moment. But on the whole, there's a lot more interest in that increased mobility and safety for a lot of clients. So definitely seeing a lot more on that side of things.
Do you have a substantial team, Simon? You look across your departments, things like the aviation or the luxury assets, an important part of the mix of the office that you have here.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got about 200 colleagues here on the Isle of Man, specialisms in different areas. We've got client accounting teams, administration teams. There is a specific focus on yachting and aviation assets. So, seen as a key area for us in terms of existing clients, but also for potential growth as well.
Okay, interesting. And when I've been meeting people here over the last few days, we've been talking a lot as well about crypto and digital assets and innovation that exists around technology that's present on the island. Are you seeing any of that filtering through to your business in terms of new clients or new structuring opportunities from these new type of assets?
There's a lot of opportunity. We have chosen to be quite carefully with the crypto side. It is, I still say, a little bit of an unknown from a lot of people, certainly on clients and taxation. It is getting some clarity, but yes, that link in between the e-gaming and the tech sector on the Isle of Man has definitely enhanced its image here. So it is like everything, though it's still relatively new, and one just has to be quite careful on how you structure, etc. on that basis.
Because it carries a lot of risk for you to take on as an asset versus a commercial property or
very
something
much,
else more
very
familiar.
much so. I think, as I say, the industry is growing with it, but there's always had to be caution.
And Simon, one of the big trends in the industry is a focus around ESG and sustainable investment. Is that an important part of the offering at IQEQ?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's obviously our own ESG strategy, own ESG policy and agenda, but the other side that we provide is something called Compass, which is an ESG health check for our clients, which allows them to assess their own ESG standards and helps them with policies and frameworks and other areas in which clients can continue to improve their ESG strategy as well.
John, at a client level, do you see that also being important? Yeah. Is there more demand and conversation around?
Certainly for the fund business, which isn't so much focused on the Isle of Man, but is certainly through London, Guernsey and Luxembourg. That's a very important factor from the investor's perspective. And also for the family offices. We have a number of very large family offices and clients, and that is a focus for them, especially on the more robust and publicly traded entities especially.
Because there's a lot of talk about the next gen and the great wealth transfer and new different types of clients coming through. How do you see it from the coalface, as it were? Do you see a new type of client coming through with different interests and demands, or actually is it more subtle and
I think it's a little bit more subtle, although there are a number of clients that are relatively young, very cash liquid, and looking to divest into other industries and other investments. As I say, from that, our fund industry is doing extremely well. There are a number of fund managers that are utilising our services, primarily because the fund manager, the individual or the family, is extremely proactive on that side and is creating new industries which people can invest in.
And finally, on an international basis, where do you think the Isle of Man really excels and sets itself apart from other jurisdictions?
I think that really the legislation is a real plus. We're over 1,000 years. We have a well-established government system and parliament. We're very close to the UK in legal system, although independent. But we want to work closely with the UK, which is obviously a global brand. And with the growth of IQEQ and its strategy, it's allowed us to become part of a bigger thing rather than just trying to compete on our own. And I think that's a really exciting time, not just for IQEQ, but for all the other offices and the island itself.
Great. And Simon, how do you see the Isle of Man versus other jurisdictions?
I think one of the core competencies here is really about ease of doing things, really good partnership between government and private sector, working together. Yeah, just very easy to get things done, a very collaborative approach across the island. We touched on the substance point earlier, lots of space for businesses that want to relocate here. But I think just generally, on top of what John said, it's very much a can-do attitude and from various parts across the island, and a very supportive approach to getting things done.
Great. Well, look, thank you for talking to me today, and we look forward to sharing this interview.
Cheers. Thank you, David.
Thanks very much.
The latest technical content delivered through global conversations with professionals for professionals.